But given the fact we're constantly at war with each other over the quality of whatever it's been putting out recently, some people love it, some people hate it, I would like to see more discussion of this one overriding question that no one wants to think about. If Doctor Who was a new franchise that was being launched today, would it catch on? Answer me that. No self-denial, no fanboy factionalism, no vendettas, no talk of the big personalities. Look at the broader landscape of streaming and tell me honestly if you think this model still works.
I reject the question. Let me explain. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and today we're doing something a little bit different because I watched this video from Stewbagfull a couple of days ago. Is Doctor Who outdated? And I can't really stop thinking about it, and I disagree with a big chunk of what Stu has to say. I agree with an awful lot of the video, and I didn't just want to throw out like a pithy tweet or a blue sky response or something. I actually wanted to sort of like dive deeply into the topic. Now, normally I save my response videos for people who I like ideologically massively disagree with. Stu, I don't think, is one of those people. I actually have a huge amount of respect for him. I massively admire his ability to be able to say contrary or unpopular opinions within the fandom and not just be hounded off of the platform by death threats, which, believe it or not, is incredibly rare in Doctor Who. Now, I didn't just feel compelled to make this response video because I feel like I am literally this person who Stu has drawn in this caricature of fanboys arguing online. You know, this one here is Stu, you know, with the brown hair, but this one here, like, you know, with the dark hair and the beard stubble, and even like the perspective with the desk and the monitor, like, I don't know, is this us? Like, now, I want to go into this response, which is not scripted. I have some notes, but, you know, this is just mainly going to be rambling about the topic of whether or not Doctor Who is outdated. But I'm going to put a link to the original video in the description below for you folks to watch first, and then come back here. Like Stu's video, subscribe to his channel, support any crowdfunding or any other thing he's got for any of his upcoming film projects. You know, I like Stu a lot. But when I watched this video, I couldn't help but feel that there was some really big blind spots in terms of just the current state of Doctor Who, and also just the current state of the streaming world and the media industry more broadly. And I think one of the main blind spots in Stu's video is just a matter of demographics for like modern shows, particularly ones on streaming. The very first show that Stu cites in his video is the Paw Patrol, where he lays out the Paw Patrol principle. You know, maybe the show is good, does it have the right tone, is it fit for purpose, is the voice acting good, but would you waste your spare time watching this? And that's the Paw Patrol principle. The next show that he cites is My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, which I don't really know anything about, but it is a show that has managed to cross age demographics from its intended purpose. But then for the rest of the video, Stu references this catalogue of streaming services as the modern streaming landscape, and I'm not quoting him out of context here, that's literally what he says.
If the show wants to fit in with the streaming landscape...
So this is, at least in a simplified term for the purposes of this video that Stu has presented, what he considers to be the modern streaming landscape. We've got Squid Game, Midnight Mass, Severance, Baby Reindeer, Stranger Things, and Wednesday. Now, what do almost all of these shows have in common? Apart from the fact that all of them, apart from Severance, are on Netflix. So we're missing out Amazon, we're missing out Disney Plus exclusives, etc. Well, all of these shows, bar Wednesday, and even then I think it's a bit, you know, blurred lines, are aimed at adults, like explicitly adult audiences. I am not getting a teenager or a kid to watch Squid Game. I am not getting a kid or a teenager to watch Baby Reindeer. I know it's not the explicit intention of Stu here, but comparing Baby Reindeer to something like what Doctor Who could be for the modern streaming landscape, I think that's a bit silly. If you just go for BBFC classification, all of these shows, bar Baby Reindeer and Wednesday, are rated 15. Baby Reindeer obviously being an 18 rated show and Wednesday being a 12A rated show, but I don't think it's marketed as a 12A show. I do think it is more for like a older teenager demographic. Stranger Things has got younger characters in it, but it is an adult show, dealing with adult subject matter, and when it first started, despite the younger cast, it was aimed at adults who had 80s nostalgia. Now, you could argue, especially for shows like Wednesday, that maybe the bar for a younger audience finding a show like this is a lot easier, depending on what sort of parental controls and filters you may have on your streaming services. My wife was watching wrestling the other day, which has recently come to Netflix, and she made the observation that they don't have the, don't try this at home disclaimer that they used to have when wrestling was on TV. And I think a reason for that is because, on TV, any kid could just change the channel and stumble across wrestling, so they have to have those disclaimers just in case. Whereas on streaming, I think it's a lot less likely for somebody to accidentally stumble across it, especially with, once again, those parental controls that you can have. And on YouTube, you've got YouTube Kids and like Kids Netflix and stuff like that. So the reason I'm really honing in on this particular part of the video is to set up why I've been thinking about this Doctor Who outdated YouTube video for so long. Because at one point earlier on in the video, Stu frames Doctor Who in context to Paw Patrol, and I think when framed alongside all of these videos, it kind of unintentionally makes a really interesting observation about Doctor Who in the current media landscape.
As I watched those opening episodes of that season of Doctor Who with its singing goblins and talking babies, I could picture what was being marketed as a new iteration of Doctor Who that's been retooled, so now it's a show kinda one step up from Paw Patrol, going more for that 8 to 12 age range than Doctor Who's main series used to back in the late 2000s.
I think Stu is a little bit older than me, and while I do relate to an awful lot of the things he says in the videos about watching, those Series 2 prequels on the old BBC website and it would crash midway through, I was 12 years old when I discovered the 2005 series. I turned 13 between the broadcast of Bad Wolf and The Parting of the Ways. But yeah, so you have this age demographic of 1 to 6 for Paw Patrol, Bluey, Hey Duggee, and all of the very popular streaming or TV shows that are aimed at that particular demographic, which parents for the most part will only watch in the context of being there with their kids when they're watching it. We'll throw in some CBB stuff here as well, like, CBBS Bedtime Stories, or Something Special, Justin's House, etc, etc. However, back in my day, which makes me feel very old, but back in my day, there was a significantly larger chunk of TV reserved for audiences, children, kids, after they upgraded from Paw Patrol equivalents or Bluey equivalents. It feels like the whole UK media industry, and I can't obviously speak for American TV, that doesn't get imported, it feels like UK TV has completely ceded ground to platforms like YouTube when it comes to primary school aged viewers. Back in my day, we had, of course, the Sarah Jane Adventures, yes, but we also had shows like The Raven, Tracy Beaker, My Parents Are Aliens, Wizards vs. Aliens, The Basil Brush Show, The Prank Patrol. Sidebar, how on earth has The Prank Patrol not been rebooted in some online format? Or, alternatively, reruns of Jerry Anderson's Thunderbirds. And even when I got older and started working in the TV and film industry, I worked on a lot of kids shows such as 4 O'Clock Club, Class Dismissed, and Creeped Out, but those shows aren't being made anymore. It kind of feels like that the only big show for this, 7 to 13-ish demographic is Blue Peter. It kind of feels like Blue Peter is the last holdout that has some sort of cultural cachet, but Blue Peter can't be the only reasons kids between the ages of 7 and 13 turn on a TV. I don't have kids myself, but I have friends and family who have kids who are in this sort of age range demographic. I've worked on lots of kids shows where the kids in question have been in this age range demographic, and they're not really watching TV for the most part. They're watching YouTube. They're watching Mr. Beast videos. They're watching videos where, let's try and destroy this PlayStation 5. You have 5 minutes to wrap up this expensive Lamborghini and protective equipment and stuff, and then we're going to try and destroy it, and if it survives, you get to keep it. That's basically what kids in this demographic are watching now. And let's just say for a moment that you are a kid, or a kid who is able to pry themselves off of YouTube for an hour a week to watch Doctor Who on iPlayer or on Disney Plus, or maybe even live on broadcast. Let's say that you get into Doctor Who and want to go back to YouTube to talk about it. You search up Doctor Who on the YouTube search rankings, and you just find literal Nazis talking about the show, which is its own separate problem, but it just further hits home the idea that YouTube is where most kids in this age demographic are finding their entertainment, and UK TV has basically completely ceded ground to that. Which makes this image of Doctor Who being this lone show on this pedestal for 8 to 12-year-olds kind of profound, because it does feel like in this age demographic, Doctor Who is the only big show. I genuinely, like, please let me know if you can think of anything, folks, but I genuinely can't think of another show with Doctor Who's scope or production scale or budget ambitions that is aiming for the family demographic. I genuinely can't think of one. Like, the closest that I can think of is one that Stu brings up in this video, and that's Wednesday, but I do think that Wednesday, if you watch the show, is aiming for an older audience, sort of like a, early Torchwood type of age demographic. When it comes to Doctor Who being touted as a family show, what is the in-between of watching Paw Patrol with your toddler and then watching these shows in the modern streaming landscape? I still think that Doctor Who can still be that in-between. And for me, 20 years ago, I didn't have all of these streaming shows as the show that came after Doctor Who in regards to things I'd watch with my family or things that I'd sort of, I don't want to say like upgrade into or step up into, but the adult show that I would watch with my family around the sofa was Lost. So when Stu mentions Doctor Who being touted as a family show, the genuine question is that, 20 years ago there was this massive in-between of Paw Patrol adjacent shows, then you've got Doctor Who, and then, Blue Peter, Sarah Jane Adventures, Tracy Beaker, and then beyond this I would watch Lost with my family, or specifically I'd watch Lost with my mum. Now in 2025, Doctor Who is the only show in that middle ground. The point that I'm trying to long-windedly make here is because if Doctor Who really is the only middle ground show for these age demographics now, then it does kind of by proxy get absorbed in the broader streaming landscape and ends up having to compete with all of these other shows despite ostensibly being aimed at much younger demographics or much broader demographic here. Because yes, while these are some of the biggest and most noteworthy names in the streaming landscape, Midnight Mass is for an older audience, it's for an adult audience. Severance is for an adult audience. Baby Reindeer is for an adult audience. Not just by their BBFC classifications, but just pretty explicitly in terms of their violence, their content, etc. And one big outcome of the modern streaming landscape where everything is available at the touch of a finger or the click of a remote, it means that it does, for the most part, it does in essence have a meritocratic effect on the media that gets made, where the best stuff does rise to the top. Now, some shows do obviously rise to the top and you could argue that they're terrible, and some great shows don't get discovered and they get cancelled pretty promptly. But broadly speaking, we are in a golden age of TV because of this meritocratic effect. And this is one of the fundamental disagreements that I have with Stu's Is Doctor Who Outdated video, because while he does mention the idea that, yes, sometimes Doctor Who is pants, but why don't we talk about how the modern TV landscape has changed so much? Yeah, it has changed a lot, but I think that in this environment, the quality plays a factor. And when you look at all of these shows, and just other shows more broadly, they run circles around Doctor Who in terms of quality.
Sure, Stranger Things is broadly built for everyone, Wednesday as well to a certain degree, going for that broad range of potential audiences like Doctor Who does.
So Stu cites Stranger Things as aiming for a broader audience, and while I disagree, as it is explicitly for older teenagers, it outflanks Doctor Who on basically every front because of its emphasis on characters and their journeys. Audiences were so invested in the characters and the filmmaking was so strong in the last season of Stranger Things that Max's set piece with Vecna in the last series, it became a massive big cultural moment that caused a whole new generation of audiences to embrace Kate Bush again. In terms of big viral moments in culture, Doctor Who not only hasn't had anything like that for a while outside of the obligatory regenerations, they seem actively allergic to even trying. And it's not just Stranger Things that I think this with. I think that while the amount of shows on Doctor Who's production scale aimed at family audiences is incredibly limited, so direct comparisons are difficult, when I look at all of the shows that I've watched over the past couple of years, Mr. Bates vs. the Post Office, Ludwig, Here We Go, Rivals, Borders, House of the Dragon, Sweet Pea, We Are Lady Parts, The Boys, and that's just to name a few, they all trounce Doctor Who in terms of writing quality and character work. 20 years ago, Doctor Who revolutionised UK television. It took a few years for the rest of the industry to catch up, and now in 2025, everything else is leaving Doctor Who in the dirt. And I think one reason Doctor Who feels so outdated in the modern day is not because it's still part of the same, production block that's been running for nearly 20 years in BBC and in BBC Wales. It feels outdated because it's neglected the story fundamentals of what makes good scripted TV. Yeah, the show now looks great and it has an incredible production team behind it and it's getting incredible actors, but it really just comes down to those basic story fundamentals. There's nothing resembling character arcs, there's basically no conflict between the main characters. And I think what's happened most notably with the past few episodes, with the series finale and Joy to the World, is that the show has hit headlong this issue of looking and sounding like a modern big budget streaming show on the level of like a Stranger Things or a Wednesday or a Midnight Mass. It's walking the walk, but it's so obviously not talking the talk. Like, I don't want to just make this video another Empire of Death bash along, but like the fundamentals of just character work and storytelling just went absolutely out the window there. The Doctor is defeated by Sutekh and then just finds his resolve to win again, not because of any sort of character growth or pep talk, it happens off screen. The mystery that fans had been encouraged to engage with over the past 8 weeks, or arguably 6 months if you include the Christmas special, not only were fans actively mocked by the script for wanting to engage in that mystery, but then the content of the episode actively contradicts all of the evidence leading up to it. And then just little things like, when all of the unit staff are brought back to life and Kate holds hands with Ibrahim, and it's like, I don't think these two have exchanged a single line of dialogue with each other. When the Doctor says to Ruby as she leaves for basically no reason, I talk about family differently than I ever have before, and I owe that to you, and it's like, no, you haven't, and what did Ruby do? I know it's almost becoming a bit of a meme at this point, but I have yet to meet a single person in real life who has anything nice to say about Empire of Death. I was working on a TV set last week, and I've got like a work satchel with a bunch of pins and badges in it, and one of them is a TARDIS pin, and I was walking past the director, and the director stops me because he sees the pins, and he's like, well, let's have a look. Oh, you got a TARDIS one? Oh, you're a Doctor Who fan? Oh, what do you think of Peter Capaldi? Peter Capaldi, oh, I love that. Eccleston was great, and what do you think of the last series? I really like Ncuti Gatwa, but the last few episodes were absolutely shit, absolutely horrible, and I didn't prompt him. I didn't give this guy anything like negative to work with. I was nice about Ncuti Gatwa. I was like, yeah, he's really great, he's got a lot of energy, he seems lovely. And then he just went off unprompted talking about how terrible the finale was. This isn't even the first time this has happened. I was working on the MTV Movie Awards at the late last year, wearing the same satchel with the badge, and literally the exact same thing happened with one of the runners on the team. Bought the badge, oh, you're a Doctor Who fan, do you like Ncuti Gatwa? Was an Empire of Death terrible? Like, it's astounding. I have never seen this happen with Doctor Who before. When I go on Facebook or social media and there's a story about Doctor Who, like in the news, and you go in the comment section and it's people citing with real clarity and specifics what went wrong in that finale. And I do actually think we're almost in Game of Thrones like finale territory, where the finale is just so generally accepted as bad for pretty obvious reasons that everybody's just able to like name them off the cuff without any sort of struggle, and then it just ends up harming the reputation of the show more broadly. So, like I said, Doctor Who does not feel outdated because it's part of this 2005 production block. It feels outdated because it's just lacking the basic story fundamentals that everybody has just grown accustomed to and expects from their media nowadays. Something which, and I'm going to get back to this later, the 2005 series had in abundance. That's why it became successful in the first place when it was rebooted. In the video, Stu talks about how he used to watch Doctor Who with his mum growing up, and then they drifted apart a little bit, but then when Stu talks about how much he loves 73 Yards and that he thinks that his mum would like it, so they watch it together and she really enjoys it. However, I would argue, and Stu will know his mum better than me, obviously, I think that Stu's mum would have had exactly the same reaction to the episode had she also watched it alongside the other 8 episodes that season. I think that's an issue, because once again, while the modern streaming era age of Doctor Who tries to walk the walk, it doesn't talk the talk. There are no concrete character arcs or any sort of growth or change from the characters from the first meeting to their departure at the end of the series. Stu talks about a potential revitalization of Doctor Who in the near future being something almost akin to what Doctor Who Flux was going for under Chris Chibnall. And yes, I agree that I think Chibnall was kind of onto something here, and the pandemic and production logistics completely scuppered a more refined and polished and well executed version of a 6-episode non-serialized story. I do think that Stu oversells the idea that shows like Wednesday are telling like one long big story, which they kind of are. Wednesday is technically telling one long big mystery story over the span of 8 episodes, but each of those episodes do have their own mostly standalone A-plot. Episode 1's the introduction, episode 2 is the student tournament, 3 is the field trip, 4 is the school dance, etc, until you get to the 2-part finale with Uncle Fester. One of the BBC's biggest shows last year was Ludwig, which is a comedy crime drama where David Mitchell plays this missing detective's twin brother, and because they're identical twins, he's socially awkward, but he's able to sort of infiltrate the police station where his brother used to work at to try and figure out why he went missing. Yes, the mystery of this missing twin brother is the overarching story arc of Ludwig. However, each episode has its own standalone case. Stu mentions rightly that in 2006 it was much harder to keep up with the show, and if you missed an episode but you watched Revenge of the Cybermen or The Age of Steel, then you might be better equipped to go into the finale. And he says that in an age of streaming and the iPlayer and Disney Plus and everything, that's not an issue. That's absolutely true. However, surely that development and accessibility means that you need to reward viewers more with their time, with stronger character work over the course of the season. And this is what I was referring to earlier with Stu's mum liking 73 Yards, but I think she would have had exactly the same reaction to watching 73 Yards on its own, isolated from everything else, and watching all of the past season, like, in totality. I think her reaction in response to 73 Yards would have been pretty much identical, because there's nothing else surrounding 73 Yards to inform the character work of that story. And that's a major issue. And while I think Stu is right in that due to tablets and phones, people don't watch TV together as much, or at least in the same way that they did back in the 1960s when Doctor Who started, I think, maybe Stu was just being hyperbolic for the sake of dramatic effect, but I'd argue that the, family or a group of friends sitting around to watch a big event TV show, that's not entirely gone. I think that the recent smash hit of the last series of The Traitors, which in the UK, the last series was watched on average by around 10 million people. Either watch it on the night or catch up as soon as possible, watch it with friends, watch it with family. That was event TV that everyone gathered around a live TV to watch on the sofa. Chat to almost anyone who watched TV over Christmas and they watched the latest Gavin and Stacey or Wallace and Gromit or Doctor Who. They watched it with friends or with family. It was, a communal experience. I think those recent examples from just the last month shows that communal viewing experiences for non-sporting events, it's not fully died. I just think that people are more selective about it, which once again comes to the idea that, I know it sounds so simplistic, and Stu mentions it in the video as well, sort of like preemptively lambasting this area of discussion.
None of the crap that I've talked about in this video should matter. It would be nice if we lived in a world where good art is just good because it's good and bad art is just bad because it's bad.
So I get what he's saying there, but honestly, there's no easier way to say this. If Doctor Who was just better, then yeah, maybe could do that. And going back to 73 Yards again, I think 73 Yards is a really good example to prove my point, because when I did my review, I revisited The Curse of Clyde Langer, which is, was it series 5 of the Sarah Jane Adventures, which is also going for a similar mystical theme similar to 73 Yards, and with the exception of its production values, in basically every other respect, it runs circles around 73 Yards. And this is why I slightly object to the framing of the question for is Doctor Who outdated with this part that Stu mentions in the video.
I can't really see Doctor Who as it exists now taking hold of everyone if it was launched these days. It got rebooted in 2005 and it swapped showrunners, companions, doctors, but in terms of the core function it's designed to carry out, it's pretty much the same as it always was. If you don't believe me that this is really quite an obvious problem, try watching back Series 1 of the reboot while attempting to remove your nostalgia goggles. Watch it while actively comparing it to shows that you watch nowadays and Doctor Who as it currently exists. Yes, it's good, very good, but it is very obvious that it is now older than the last classic Doctor Who serial was at the point that it was made, and it is also incredibly similar to Doctor Who as it exists in the present day.
See, this is one of the, I think it's just basically where me and Stu will fundamentally disagree, because yes, the 2005 series is very similar to what Doctor Who is doing in 2024, because what 2024 is doing is just the lamer, heated leftovers of what's been happening in 2005. But outside of, it feeling very 2005 in terms of its production values and colour palette and some dated references and stuff, the 2005 series, where it counts at least, is able to hold a candle to stuff like Wednesday and Stranger Things and the broader streaming landscape, because the story fundamentals in 2005 are 10,000 times stronger than they are now in 2024. The foundations don't necessarily need updating, it just needs foundations. It needs character journeys. It needs characters for a start. It needs conflict. It needs something to say. It needs to challenge the characters.
And there's obviously gonna be some teething issues as these franchises try and adapt themselves to changing times. You can't expect stuff that worked in 2005 to work perfectly forever.
But, Stu, I respectfully ask, what do you mean by stuff? I know you shouldn't have to qualify every single statement. I know you shouldn't have to back up absolutely everything when you're trying to stay on point, and I get it. But what do you mean by stuff? Because I'm just kind of interpreting this from the outside as basic storytelling. No, it's not always going to stick the landing, but this is literally what all good scripted TV is based around. And I think that's what's missing in current Doctor Who. It's the basic stuff. And I know the big elephant in the room here is that Stu seems adamant to avoid the discussion of why this has happened in order to prevent the discussion from becoming too personal and, name calling and stuff when it comes to like Russell T Davies or the creatives at Bad Wolf or Disney or the BBC and such. But you do kind of have to remember, and I know that Stu knows this, is that people do make this media and either have made active creative decisions or the people above them have made the decisions for them to implement. And that's why I reject Stu's framing of the question, is Doctor Who outdated? Doctor Who is not a naturally occurring force like gravity. It's something that is made by people. I can't claim to know Stu's motives here. I'm guessing that he wanted to take this approach, this non-personal approach, because he wants to distance himself from online reactionaries who make things incredibly personal. I absolutely relate. If you folks know anything about this channel, you'll know that I don't take that approach at all. I actively combat it. Let's not forget how absolutely unhinged and crazy fandom or fandom adjacent personalities can be. Need I remind you, one of the main prevailing conspiracy theories during the Chibnall era is that it was horrible and terribly bad on purpose because Chris Chibnall is secretly Jewish and that's why he's trying to tear down culture. I want to distance myself from that completely, obviously. And just to show how good faith I'm going to try and be here, I want to show you one of my most prized possessions. I've talked about this before in a video years and years ago when I first got it. In my old office space, I had this right behind my monitor, so it was a constant reminder. It's the storyboard of the end of Twice Upon a Time, which shows the 13th Doctor looking at her reflection after regenerating. The console explodes and boom, an explosion. This is an actual storyboard print from the BBC for Doctor Who. And I've not put this up yet because I'm still decorating and sorting out my office, and I'm planning to paint these walls and get bigger shelves and stuff like that at some point. But the plan is that this is going to go behind my monitor there, always in view when I'm making these videos and these live streams and recording and everything, as a constant reminder that the media that I watch is made by people. It is made by creatives who have made creative decisions, and to hold myself to a certain standard when talking about said media as if they were in the room with you. Or at the very least, act like you know they're going to watch the review. So it's with that in mind when I say that I won't insult, I won't get personal, I won't hold it against the creatives of current modern Doctor Who as people. but it is people who make these creative decisions. I don't know who or where the line is drawn or whatever. Maybe it's Russell T Davies, maybe deliberately seeking to make Doctor Who more simplistic, or maybe it's the BBC or Disney over his shoulder, looming down on him, saying, tone it down, make it simpler, more broader. I don't know how they settled on these creative decisions, but creative decisions nevertheless were made. And these are creative decisions that I strongly disagree with. And I almost kind of think that Stu maybe possibly even agrees with me on this front, because these two statements exist in the same video.
As I watched those opening episodes of that season of Doctor Who with its singing goblins and talking babies, I could picture what was being marketed as a new iteration of Doctor Who that's been retooled, so now it's a show kinda one step up from Paw Patrol.
And then later on in the video, Stu says,
same deal with the finale, which is designed for the classic Doctor Who obsessives. Complain at me all you want, success or failure, that's who it's obviously designed for.
So these two statements existing in the same video reminded me of what a friend of mine said to me over Christmas in relation to Doctor Who's current state. I can't remember who said it, but whoever said it absolutely hit the nail on the head perfectly. Modern Doctor Who feels like a show aimed at 10-year-olds who have been watching Doctor Who for 50 years. And that so perfectly sums up everything that's gone wrong with the past season. Doctor Who doesn't necessarily feel outdated because there are more screens in the house and there's less occasions for everyone in the family to get on the sofa and to watch the same TV show at the same time, even though I do agree with those sentiments. Stu is completely correct there. No, what's happened over the past 20 years, but strictly speaking mainly the past 10 years, is that due to legacy media essentially ceding ground entirely to online spaces when it comes to catering to a post-Paw Patrol audience, it means that Doctor Who now standing alone on this single pillar for 8 to 12-year-olds, it means that just by sheer cultural forces, it is forced to compete with all of these other streaming shows, which lap it several times over in terms of quality, in terms of writing standards, in terms of character work, in terms of big bombastic viral moments, which maybe you could argue the ending of Dot and Bubble is the closest that we've had to one of those for Doctor Who, but more realistically it's maybe something akin to Heaven Sent, or maybe something akin to the ending of Vincent and the Doctor. I've not watched a single episode of Severance, but I know it by reputation, and I've also seen that same incredibly ambitious, lengthy shot of him running through all those corridors that's gone viral. Even if you didn't watch Baby Reindeer, you basically know the story because it captured audiences so effectively that it was able to dominate the media cycle for an entire month, very similar to Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. Even if you've never watched Wednesday and don't know what a Jenna Ortega is, you'll have seen the dance sequence. I first heard about Squid Game when it first dropped, not because I saw it on Netflix, not because I saw any reviews or anything, but because a YouTube short showed the red light, green light scene. And of course, we've already talked about Stranger Things, particularly the last scene, which basically gave Kate Bush a second lease on life. Doctor Who, whether it likes it or not, or at this point even knows it or not, is competing in this same marketplace, even if it's not aimed at the same audience. And as a result, it's got to up its game. And I don't think that Russell T Davies is incapable of doing it, but when you watch It's a Sin or Years and Years, and then you watch the latest season of Doctor Who, honestly, doesn't even feel like the same person. Maybe my standards are a little bit higher because I'm so spoiled by all of the expanded media for Doctor Who. You know, I get the books, I get all of the audio dramas and such. So while I think that the best episode of the last season was Boom, if I were to do a, here's my top 20 Doctor Who stories of 2024, I don't even think Boom would make it. I know I keep banging on this drum, and I know that I am making this video only a couple of days after it was announced that we are getting 4 brand new writers for the next season of Doctor Who, but in terms of the creatives at the top, the actual producers, and Russell T Davies, the showrunner, I do think that the show, from the top, needs fresh blood. And you go to Big Finish and you see these incredible recurring talents who month after month, year after year, are just bringing us back-to-back bangers and incredible Doctor Who. For example, if you take Space Babies from the last season and you replace it with a story like Pursuit of the Nightjar written by Tim Foley, and we're just not having this conversation. Replace Empire of Death with a finale like Slow Beast written by Dan Rebelato, or The Quintessence written by Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle, and we're not having this conversation. Replace Joy to the World with Spirit of the Season by Georgia Cook, and we're not having this conversation. I guarantee it. And I know that earlier on Stu mentions that Doctor Who, with its Christmas outings, is a lot more zany and camp and bombastic because you'll have a younger audience watching. And, you know, maybe this is just like nostalgia talking, or maybe my own sort of tunnel vision, but isn't like the universally accepted best Stephen Moffat Christmas special A Christmas Carol a story whose third act emotional pivot hinges on whether or not an old man will literally beat his child self? Like, just because it's Christmas doesn't mean you don't stop trying to go for the hard-hitting drama, right? So yeah, like I said, near the end, Stu asks, like, do you think that Doctor Who would still be able to gain an audience today? Keep in mind the modern streaming landscape and such. And I think that Doctor Who 2005, Series 1 Doctor Who, yes, it would. But Doctor Who Season 1 in 2024, it wouldn't. In fact, I'd go as far to say that, obviously, production values aside, you drop this series basically unchanged in terms of, like, the writing. You drop that in 2005, and, you know, while it does well, I don't think it lays the foundation strong enough to last 20 years like that first season did. And while I think there are broader market forces that make it difficult for a show like Doctor Who, a family show of its status and size, to find and maintain an audience in that younger age demographic, well, to quote a very clever Chad,
this is a very well written series, and it's the psychology that's frightening, and the children will listen to that as well as look, you know. If you make good television for children, the adults will come. That's the way I think about it.
If Doctor Who was a new franchise that was being launched today, would it catch on? Answer me that. No self-denial, no fanboy factionalism, no vendettas, no talk of the big personalities. Look at the broader landscape of streaming and tell me honestly if you think this model still works.
So my honest answer to that question is, if it's that series, yes. If it's this series, no.